Clara to Nathaniel. You are right. You have not written to me for a very long time, but nevertheless, I believe that I still retain a place in your mind and thoughts. It is a proof that you were thinking a good deal about me when you were sending off your last letter to Brother Lothar, for instead of directing it to him, you directed it to me. With joy I tore open the envelope and did not perceive the mistake until I read the words, "Oh, my dear, dear Lothar." Now I know I ought not to have read any more of the letter, but ought to have given it to my brother. But as you have so often in innocent raillery made it a sort of approach against me that I possessed such a calm and, for a woman, cool-headed temperament, that I should be like the woman we read of, if the house was threatening to tumble down, I should, before hastily fleeing, stop to smooth down a crumple in the window curtains. I need hardly tell you that the beginning of your letter quite upset me. I could scarcely breathe. There was a bright mist before my eyes. Oh, my darling Nathaniel, what could this terrible thing be that had happened? Separation from you? Never to see you again? The thought was like a sharp knife in my heart. I read on and on. Your description of that horrid Coppelius made my flesh creep. I now learnt for the first time what a terrible and violent death your good old father died. Brother Lothar, to whom I handed over his property, sought to comfort me, but with little success. That horrid weatherglass hawker, Giuseppe Coppola, followed me everywhere, and I am almost ashamed to confess it, but he was able to disturb my sound and, in general calm sleep, with all sorts of wonderful dream shapes. But soon, the next day, I saw everything in a different light. Oh, do not be angry with me, my best beloved, if, despite your strange presentiment, that Coppelius will do you some mischief. Lothar tells you I'm in quite as good spirits, and just the same as ever. I will frankly confess, it seems to me that all that was fearsome and terrible of which you speak existed only in your own self, and that the real, true, outer world had but little to do with it. I can quite admit that old Coppelius may have been highly obnoxious to you children, but your real detestation of him arose from the fact that he hated children. Naturally enough, the gruesome Sandman of the old nurse's story was associated in your childish mind with old Coppelius, who, even though you had not believed in the Sandman, would have been to you a ghostly bugbear, especially dangerous to children. His mysterious labours along with your father at night time were, I dare say, nothing more than secret experiments in alchemy, with which your mother could not be over well pleased, owing to the large sums of money that most likely were thrown away upon them. And besides, your father, his mind full of deceptive striving after higher knowledge, may probably have become rather indifferent to his family, as so often happens in the case of such experimentalists. So also it is equally probable that your father brought about his death by his own imprudence, and that Coppelius is not to blame for it. I must tell you that yesterday I asked our experienced neighbour, the chemist, whether in experiments of this kind an explosion could take place which would have a momentarily fatal effect. He said, "Oh, certainly," and described to me in his prolix and circumstantial way how it could be occasioned, mentioning at the same time so many strange and funny words that I could not remember them at all. Now I know you will be angry at your Clara, and will say of the mysterious which often clasps man in its invisible arms, there's not a ray that can find its way into this cold heart. She sees only the varied surface of the things of the world, and like the little child, is pleased with the golden glittering fruit, at the kernel of which lies the fatal poison. Oh, my beloved Nathaniel, do you believe then that the intuitive prescience of a dark power working within us to our own ruin cannot exist also in the minds which are cheerful, natural, free from care? But please forgive me that I, a simple girl, presume in any way to indicate to you what I really think of such an inward strife. After all, I should not find the proper words, and you would only laugh at me, not because my thoughts were stupid, but because I was so foolish as to attempt to tell them to you. If there is a dark and hostile power which traitorously fixes a thread in our hearts, in order that, laying hold of it and drawing us by means of it along a dangerous road to ruin, which otherwise we should not have trod, if I say there is such a power, it must assume within us a form like ourselves, nay, it must be ourselves, for only in that way can we believe in it, and only so understood do we yield to it, so far that it is able to accomplish its secret purpose. So long as we have sufficient firmness, fortified by cheerfulness, to always acknowledge foreign hostile influences for what they really are, whilst we quietly pursue the path pointed out to us by both inclination and calling, then this mysterious power perishes in its futile struggles to attain the form which is to be the reflected image of ourselves. It is also certain, Lothair adds, that if we have once voluntarily given ourselves up to this dark physical power, it often reproduces within us the strange forms which the outer world throws in our way, so that thus it is we ourselves who engender within ourselves the spirit which by some remarkable delusion we imagine to speak in that outer form. It is the phantom of our own self, whose intimate relationship with and whose powerful influence upon our soul either plunges us into hell or elevates us to heaven. Thus you will see, my beloved Nathaniel, that I and Brother Lothair have well talked over the subject of dark powers and forces, and now, after I have with some difficulty written down the principal results of our discussion, they seem to me to contain many really profound thoughts. Lothair's last words, however, I don't quite understand altogether. I only dimly guess what he means, and yet I cannot help thinking it is all very true. I beg you, dear, strive to forget the ugly advocate Coppelius, as well as the weather-glass hawker Giuseppe Coppola. Try to convince yourself that these foreign influences can have no power over you, that it is only the belief in their hostile power which can, in reality, make them dangerous to you. If every line of your letter did not betray the violent excitement of your mind, and if I did not sympathize with your condition, from the bottom of my heart, I could in truth jest about the advocate Sandman and weather-glass hawker Coppelius. Pluck up your spirits, be cheerful. I have resolved to appear to you as your guardian angel, if that ugly man Coppola should dare take it into his head to bother you in your dreams and drive him away with a good, hearty laugh. I'm not afraid of him and his nasty hands, not the least little bit. I won't let him either as advocate spoil any dainty titbits I've taken, or as Sandman rob me of my eyes. My darling, darling Nathaniel, eternally yours. Nathaniel to Lothair. I am very sorry that Clara opened and read my last letter to you. Of course, the mistake is to be attributed to my own absence of mind. She has written me a very deep philosophical letter, proving conclusively that Coppelius and Coppola only exist in my own mind and are phantoms of my own self, which will at once be dissipated as soon as I look upon them in that light. In very truth, one can hardly believe that the mind which so often sparkles in those bright, beautifully smiling childlike eyes of hers, like a sweet lovely dream, could draw such subtle and scholastic distinctions. She also mentions your name. You have been talking about me. I suppose you have been giving her lectures, since she sifts and refines everything so acutely. But enough of this. I must now tell you it is most certain that the weather-glass hawker, Giuseppe Coppola, is not the advocate Coppelius. I am attending the lectures of our recently appointed professor of physics, who, like the distinguished naturalist, is called Splanzani. and is of Italian origin. He has known Coppola for many years, and it is also easy to tell from his accent that he really is a Piedmontese. Coppelius was a German, though no honest German, I fancy. Nevertheless, I am not quite satisfied. You and Clara will perhaps take me for a gloomy dreamer, but know how can I get rid of the impression which Coppelius's cursed face made upon me? I'm glad to learn from Spallanzani that he has left the town. This Professor Spallanzani is a very queer fish. He is a little fat man with prominent cheekbones, thin nose, projecting lips, and small, piercing eyes. You cannot get a better picture of him than by turning over one of the Berlin pocket almanacs and looking at Cagliostro's portrait engraved by Hodowieski. Spallanzani looks just like him. Once lately, as I went up the steps to his house, I perceived that beside the curtain which generally covered a glass door, there was a small chink. What it was that excited my curiosity I cannot explain, but I looked through. In the room I saw a female, tall, very slender, but of perfect proportions, and splendidly dressed, sitting at a little table, on which she had placed both her arms, her hands being folded together. She sat opposite the door, so that I could easily see her angelically beautiful face. She did not appear to notice me, and there was, moreover, a strangely fixed look about her eyes. I might almost say they appeared as if they had no power of vision. I thought she was sleeping with her eyes open. I felt quite uncomfortable, and so I slipped away quietly into the professor's lecture room, which was close at hand. Afterwards I learnt that the figure which I had seen was Spallanzani's daughter, Olympia, whom he keeps locked in a most wicked and unaccountable way, and no man is ever allowed to come near her. Perhaps, however, there is after all something peculiar about her. Perhaps she's an idiot or something of that sort. But why am I telling you all this? I could have told you it all better and more in detail when I see you. For in a fortnight I shall be amongst you. I must see my dear sweet angel, my Clara, again. Then the little bit of ill temper which I must confess took possession of me after her fearfully sensible letter will be blown away. And that is the reason why I am not writing to her as well today. With all best wishes. Nothing more strange and extraordinary can be imagined, gracious reader, than what happened to my poor friend, the young student Nathaniel, and which I have undertaken to relate to you. Have you ever lived to experience anything that completely took possession of your heart and mind and thoughts, to the utter exclusion of everything else? All was seething and boiling within you. Your blood, heated to fever pitch, leapt through your veins and inflamed your cheeks. Your gaze was so peculiar, as if seeking to grasp in empty space forms not seen in any other eye, and all your words ended in sighs betokening some mystery. Then your friends asked you, "What is the matter with you, my dear friend? What do you see?" And wishing to describe the inner pictures in all their vivid colors, with their lights and their shades, you in vain struggled to find words with which to express yourself. But you felt as if you must gather up all the events that had happened, wonderful, splendid, terrible, jocose, and awful, in the very first word, so that the whole might be revealed by a single electric discharge, so to speak. Yet every word and all that partook of the nature of communication by intelligible sounds seemed to be colourless, cold, and dead. Then you try and try again, and stutter and stammer, whilst your friends' prosy questions strike like icy winds upon your heart's hot fire until they extinguish it. But if, like a bold painter, You had first sketched in a few audacious strokes of the outline of the picture you had in your soul. You would then easily have been able to deepen and intensify the colors one after the other until the varied throng of living figures carried your friends away, and they, like you, saw themselves in the midst of the scene that had proceeded out of your own soul. Strictly speaking, indulgent reader, I must indeed confess to you, nobody has asked me for the history of young Nathaniel, but you are very well aware that I belong to that remarkable class of authors who, when they are bearing everything about in their minds in the manner I have just described, feel as if everybody who comes near them, and also the whole world to boot, were asking, "Oh, what is it? Oh, do tell us, my good sir." Hence I was most powerfully impelled to narrate to you Nathaniel's ominous life. My soul was full of the elements of wonder and extraordinary peculiarity in it, but for this very reason, and because it was necessary in the very beginning to dispose you, indulgent reader, to bear with what is fantastic, and that is not a little thing, I racked my brain to find a way of commencing the story in a significant and original manner, calculated to arrest your attention. To begin with, once upon a time, the best beginning for a story seemed to me too tame, and in the small country town S lived rather better. At any rate, allowing plenty of room to work up to the climax, or to plunge at once in medias res. "Go to the devil," cried the student Nathaniel, his eyes blazing wildly with rage and fear when the weatherglass hawker Giuseppe Coppola. Well, that is what I really had written when I thought I detected something of the ridiculous in Nathaniel's wild glance, and the history is anything but laughable. I could not find any words which seemed fitted to reflect, in even the feeblest degree, the brightness of the colors of my mental vision. I determined not to begin at all, so I pray you, gracious reader, accept the 3 letters which my friend Lothair has been so kind as to communicate to me as the outline of the picture, into which I will endeavor to introduce more and more color as I proceeded with my narrative. Perhaps, like a good portrait painter, I may succeed in depicting more than one figure in such wise that you will recognize it as a good likeness without being acquainted with the original, and feel as if you had very often seen the original with your own bodily eyes. Perhaps too you will then believe that nothing is more wonderful, nothing more fantastic than real life, and that all that a writer can do is to present it as a dark reflection from a dim-cut mirror. In order to make the very commencement more intelligible, it is necessary to add to the letters that, soon after the death of Nathaniel's father, Clara and Lothair, the children of a distant relative who had likewise died, leaving them orphans, were taken by Nathaniel's mother into her own house. Clara and Nathaniel conceived a warm affection for each other, against which not the slightest objection in the world could be urged. When therefore Nathaniel left home to prosecute his studies in G, they were betrothed. It is from G that his last letter is written, where he is attending the lectures of Splanzani, the distinguished professor of physics. I might now proceed comfortably with my narration, did not at this moment Clara's image rise up so vividly before my eyes that I cannot turn them away from it, just as I never could when she looked upon me and smiled so sweetly. Nowhere would she have passed for beautiful. That was the unanimous opinion of all who professed to have any technical knowledge of beauty. But whilst architects praised the pure proportions of her figure and form, painters averred that her neck, shoulders, and bosom were almost too chastely modelled, and yet, on the other hand, one and all were in love with her glorious Magdalene hair, and talked a good deal of nonsense about Battoni-like colouring. One of them, a veritable romanticist, strangely enough likened her eyes to a lake by Reisdal, in which is reflected the pure azure of the cloudless sky, the beauty of woods and flowers, and all the bright and varied life of a living landscape. Poets and musicians went still further and said, "What's all this talk about seas and reflections? How can we look upon the girl without feeling that wonderful, heavenly songs and melodies beam upon us from her eyes, penetrating deep down into our hearts till all becomes awake and throbbing with emotion? And if we cannot sing anything at all passable, then why? We are not worth much." And this we can also plainly read in the rare smile which flits around her lips when we have the hardihood to squeak out something in her presence which we pretend to call singing, in spite of the fact that it is nothing more than a few single notes confusedly linked together. And it really was so. Clara had the powerful fancy of a bright, innocent, unaffected child, a woman's deep and sympathetic heart, and an understanding clear, sharp, and discriminating. Dreamers and visionaries had but a bad time of it with her, for without saying very much, she was not by nature of a talkative disposition. She plainly asked, by her calm, steady look and rare ironical smile, "How can you imagine, my dear friends, that I can take these fleeting shadowy images of true living and breathing forms?" For this reason, many found fault with her as being cold, prosaic, and devoid of feeling. Others, however, who had reached a clearer and deeper conception of life, were extremely fond of the intelligent, childlike, large-hearted girl, but none had such an affection for her as Nathaniel, who was a zealous and cheerful cultivator of the fields of science and art. Clara clung to her lover with all her heart. The first clouds she encountered in life were when he had to separate from her. With what delight did she fly into his arms when, as he had promised in his last letter to Lothair, he really came back to his native town and entered his mother's room. And as Nathaniel had foreseen, the moment he saw Clara again, he no longer thought about either the advocate, Coppelius, or her sensible letter. His ill humor had quite disappeared. Nevertheless, Nathaniel was right when he told his friend Lothair that the repulsive vendor of weather glasses, Coppola, had exercised a fatal and disturbing influence upon his life. It was quite patent to all, for even during the first few days he showed that he was completely and entirely changed. He gave himself up to gloomy reveries, and moreover acted so strangely that they had never observed anything at all like it in him before. Everything, even his own life, was to him but dreams and presentiments. His constant theme was that every man who delusively imagined himself to be free was merely the plaything of the cruel sport of mysterious powers, and it was vain for man to resist them. He must humbly submit to whatever destiny had decreed for him. He went so far as to maintain that it was foolish to believe that a man could do anything in art or science of his own accord, for the inspiration in which alone any true artistic work could be done did not proceed from the spirit within outwards, but was the result of the operation directed inwards of some higher principle existing without and beyond ourselves. This mystic extravagance was in the highest degree repugnant to Clara's clear, intelligent mind, but it seemed vain to enter upon any attempt at refutation. Yet when Nathaniel went on to prove that Coppelius was the evil principle which had entered into him and taken possession of him at the time he was listening behind the curtain, and that this hateful demon would in some terrible way ruin their happiness, then Clara grew grave and said, "Yes, Nathaniel, you are right.